This episode finally answered the age-old question that I'm sure all of us had about Star Trek Discovery. Do you think that the shuttle bay could hold a good performance of cats? Because, yes, it can. Hello interwebs and welcome to my review of Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 9, Terra Firma, Part 1. And yes, unlike other parts of episodes this season, this Part 1 does in fact have a Part 2 coming next week. So I'm kind of glad for that, because we've had Unification 3 and then That Hope Is You Part 1, with neither of those sequel episodes happening in this season. Either they happened before or maybe they'll be happening in the future. I don't know. But anyways, have I spent too long on this bit and hammering this point? Probably, because I am going to give you all of my thoughts. First up, my spoiler-free thoughts, and then we will dig into the deep dive with my spoiler section. But if you haven't seen the episode, there will be some spoiler-free parts up front here. Now, apologies if my spoiler-free section is incredibly vague this week, because the main part of this episode, just even mentioning what that plot eventually becomes, is itself just a whole mess of a spoiler. So I can't really talk anywhere specifically about it. What I can say in terms of the spoiler-free section is I think this episode was one of my personal favorites of the season. While there are a few things in this that once the main plot of this episode becomes clear, I kind of see where it's going and what the arc of the character is. It is incredibly fun to watch, and it is all executed incredibly well. No pun intended there with execute. If you've seen the episode, you know what I mean. But yes, so it is a bit predictable once the main plot gets going, but it is very well done, very entertaining, and the actors are all clearly having a ball doing it, and I'm just having a ball watching it. So this is a very enjoyable episode on those terms. There's also some really intriguing questions that get brought up this episode. Again, I can't really talk about it specifically because that gets into the spoiler-filled section, but there is a character that appears in this episode that I have a ton of questions about, and that's about all I can say in the spoiler-free section, but it did leave me very intrigued and very excited to see where part 2 of this story is going to go. I think the only thing that I could level against this episode is a bit of a weird structural problem that just comes from the very fact that Star Trek Discovery is a much more serialized show than previous Star Treks. The first third to a half of this episode is all kind of dealing with other stuff, basically kind of nudging forward just a little bit a bunch of different storylines that have been going on this season, namely with the Burn and with Book, and a little bit with Saru and sort of the larger Starfleet picture in this time period. All of that sort of addressed and sort of poked just a hair forward in the first third to a half of this episode, and then once the main plot, clearly what the writers of the episode really wanted to focus on, starts going, none of that stuff comes up again. It's just all focusing on this latter half of the plot. And you can clearly kind of see that first half was just sort of like getting these little elements out of the way to say like, all right, yeah, we're addressing it, we're poking it forward, and now we're going to focus on the thing that we really want to focus on. So clearly a bit of a weird structural problem just because of how Discovery itself is just built as a show, as a more serialized show, and everything that is there is good. Like, I think there's a lot of really good character moments in that forward section, but it is a little bit structurally weird just given, that the rest of this episode just does not focus on that at all and becomes its completely separate thing, albeit also equally interesting thing. And I also think that this will be a little bit cleared up a little bit more once we have part 2 of this episode. I feel like this episode will feel a little bit more complete and a little less wonky structurally once viewed as a whole two-parter. Again, I can't really judge that without having seen part 2, but I feel like structurally it will work a little bit better once you have both pieces like watched in full. But that being said, that does not make this episode on its own bad, just a little bit structurally weird, but by no means bad in any way. So it's like the mildest of complaints. Otherwise, great episode. I am so excited to talk spoilers about it because I have had to just remain completely vague up front, but a really wonderful episode. And if you have not seen this one, please go watch it now because it is way too exciting to not talk about. Alright, now that all the lame-o people have left who haven't seen the episode, now it's time to switch to different lighting. Let's just get there we go. Because it's mirror universe time, baby. Ah, yeah, it's evil. Everyone's evil. I'm evil. I'm actually the mirror universe, Jesse. Whoa. No, not really. Actually, I like the blue. Blue is a better aesthetic for me. So let's just pop that back on. Yeah, I look better in blue. I think we can all agree, right? Even though I'm wearing red. Just roll with it. It was a joke, okay? It was a bit. Just go with the bit. Stop judging me, okay? Now I'm in a bit mood today. I just have a lot of bits going on. Anyways, yes. Now that we're in the spoiler-filled section, I'm gonna go through this whole episode, but right? This episode was exciting and really cool. I don't know if it was my favorite episode of the season, but there was a lot to get pumped and excited about right up front, starting with the very first scene. We have David Cronenberg on the ship with Wilson Cruz talking about Georgiou, and we get that wonderful TNG season 1 uniform. I know we sort of got it spoiled in the ready room. I kind of wish we hadn't gotten it spoiled. That's sort of like the teaser scene in the ready room, because it would have been so cool to just been surprised by the season 1 uniform. But this is a really fun scene between David Cronenberg. I don't care what his real name is. I know a trans person not respecting someone's name. I get it. Haha. There's the joke. I am all sorts of sarcastic today. Sorry, folks. Anyways, I'm calling him David Cronenberg because it's David frickin' Cronenberg. And it's a really great scene. I love the fact that we're getting references to the temporal Cold War, that Enterprise is just finally getting its due as a series in terms of references and respect. The respect Star Trek Enterprise deserves as a series. But I like this idea of the fact that Georgiou is sick because she not only traveled through time, but through another universe as well. I think that's a really clever idea and makes sense that they would know past the temporal Cold War more of the effects of time travel in parallel universes, and that David Cronenberg would sort of have that in his back pocket and sort of be aware of that. And I also like this idea of, like, you don't want to tell Georgiou that she's dying because you want to die a good death. And this is something that comes up a few times throughout this episode. I think a little bit later in the gym scene between Georgiou and Burnham that I'll be talking about in just a second. But it is interesting that there's this idea of honor and sort of dying well within the Terran Empire. It's sort of like a repeated theme throughout this episode of like loyalty and things like that. It makes me think a lot about the Klingons, but the thing that differentiates Klingons from the Terrans in the Terran Empire and the Mirror Universe is their interpretation of what honor is, and their honor is a little bit more fascisty than sort of like Bushido samurai Japanese sort of honor system that the Klingons sort of eventually came to grow into. But you can kind of see they're very sort of flip sides of a similar coin here, which I thought was kind of intriguing in terms of sort of characterization of the Terrans, which have always been sort of cartoonish up until, and even up through Discovery and through this episode, they're still very cartoonish as well. But in sort of an intriguing idea. But then we get this idea of the sphere data sort of giving this idea of a place to cure Georgiou, which makes sense to me, building out the sphere data as sort of a thing, maybe building into Calypso and the ship sort of becoming much more sentient, much more aware of itself. So I like that little seeding of a piece here that it sort of helps out Georgiou and helps out this situation. So all cool, and that's only the very first scene, guys. There's so much in this episode. And then we get a small scene with Georgiou in the dining hall, which was fine. She gets a bit like pissy. It's sort of a reminder that Tilly is able to come in and try and be a number one, being the first officer, sort of caring for her, the sort of differences between this universe. I thought that was nice. Also a little bit of reminder of Captain Killy, because that will be coming up later. There's a lot of nice little references throughout this episode to stuff that will be coming up again later on in this episode. I like that sort of reminders that we get at the top of this episode, with Captain Killy being one of them, sort of reminding us of where Tilly was way back in season 1 when we sort of learned of her Mirror Universe counterpart, the captain of the USS Discovery. So nice little like reminder and jogging of the memory here. Then we get the scene where they're all in the ready room. I liked seeing that Admiral Vance on the Discovery and David Cronenberg and them sort of talking out the situation and sort of just giving sort of the exposition dump of the episode. I thought that was all really nice and sort of very well done. But I liked that the scene ended on this really nice note between Admiral Vance and Saru, with Vance saying, "You didn't expect me to say that this mission should go ahead." And Saru's like, yeah, given the fact that we might be having to deal with the Emerald Chain, that, you know, I was kind of surprised that you would let us go. And I like that we get a little bit of humanization for Admiral Vance here. As much as I really kind of liked Admiral Vance, I'm still not giving fully go of the conspiracy idea of like this Starfleet may be like a splinter Starfleet or maybe not have all altruistic motives. I sort of have that still ongoing theory in the back of my mind. But given that, I've really liked Admiral Vance and how he's been characterized as sort of a very thoughtful and hardline, but very, he's able to care where he needs to care and basically be able to be the staunch admiral where he needs to be the staunch admiral, but he hasn't really been humanized all that much. So this scene with Saru where he talks about, like, if your crewmember is drowning, you have to care for them. That's sometimes more important than the larger picture as a captain. I like that we sort of get a lot of history from him from that little gleaning of information without him actually saying so. Sort of evokes a lot more with his character. I think the only other time we got a sort of humanized moment with him was his moment with Adira, talking about the Tall symbiote earlier on when we first met him in his very first episode. In fact, his very first scene. Again, that was sort of a very similar sort of evoking of a larger history for this person. I think that that's very well written, where you don't need to say exactly what his history is, but we kind of get it through the writing and the performance. So I really enjoyed that scene. I also really enjoyed the name drop of Ariam against Michael Burnham, and Vance sort of questioning whether Michael Burnham would be able to let Georgiou go and that she wouldn't hesitate. It's nice to sort of see that reminder and sort of his awareness of the situation, like showing that he is very aware of the people under his command as an admiral. But also, again, a nice little reminder of Ariam as well, who does show up later on in this episode. The actress who plays Ariam does show up in the background of a couple scenes this episode, which was super nice to see her back. Super nice to see that she didn't end up as like the robot version of her. I do wonder if the fact that they name dropped her and they brought the actress back means that we might see more of her next episode or even going forward past that. But it might just be an extended cameo as well. But the fact that they're name dropping her here and bringing back the actress makes me think that maybe there'll be a little bit more with her. But I am sort of curious to see where that goes. But this is all before the opening credits, people. Jeez. Then we get this really wonderful scene with Georgiou and Michael Burnham. I think it's a really good characterizing scene between the two of them. I talked about this sort of honor system. I like this sort of push and pull. And as it sort of gets sort of drawn out later on in the episode, the reminder that this is not the Michael Burnham that Georgiou knows. This is a very different Michael Burnham, and sort of the resentment that both of them feel that they aren't the people that they want them to be, that this Georgiou is not Michael Burnham's Georgiou, and this is Burnham is not Georgiou's Burnham either. So a great little scene there. The one thing that did have me questioning is, like, do they really have like axe throwing is like a standard sort of thing, just hanging out in the gym, and all those swords just sort of like, yeah, right by the pad, we got all these sword fighting things right here in the gym. It just was like, kind of seems weird that you just have those lying out. Like, I get like axe throwing and maybe like hanging out with swords is a thing you would have in the gym, especially a Starfleet gym, which has always got like weird eclectic sports as we've seen throughout the different Star Trek series. But it just felt weird that's like, yeah, we got a very sharp axe just available to kill people with in this room. It just, axe throwing just seems like a very weird choice for a gym. But anyways, I've harped on that point a little bit too much, but whatever. It was just something I thought about. Then we get this nice little goodbye between Georgiou, Saru, Tilly, and Burnham, and also Burnham gives Georgiou's a Fitbit to sort of check her health. I was just thinking every single time I looked, is that a Fitbit? I really think that's a Fitbit on her arm. That I think the prop master probably just used a Fitbit because it looked futuristic-y. But we get a nice little goodbye with Georgiou, with everyone, with Saru and Tilly and Burnham, which has me wondering that maybe next episode might be Georgiou's last episode in Discovery, that whatever happens to her through this like universe jumping door thing, she may be saying her goodbye to this show and sort of be heading off into her Section 31 spinoff sometime in the very next episode, which would be kind of interesting. We all sort of expected her leaving would have to do with, you know, whatever happened with the burn, maybe some time travel stuff, maybe with Calypso, and would probably be happening closer to the finale of the season. So this fact that she's saying goodbye to all these characters now leads me to believe that this might be her last scene with Saru and with all these characters, at least these versions of these characters, before she leaves the show for good to go do her Section 31 spinoff. So I'm kind of curious about that. And her leaving in very next episode might be sort of an interesting sort of twist on where we thought her character arc was going to go this season. But in terms of the goodbyes, they were actually very well done. I thought that they were very heartfelt as they could have been between Georgiou and the rest of the characters on Discovery. It did feel as heartfelt as you possibly could have between those types of characters. And then we beam down to the snow planet, and then I'm going to sort of set that stuff off to the side between Michael and Georgiou and the Mirror Universe stuff, because we're going to talk about all that in a second, but I just want to finish up everything that happens on Discovery here first, because we get a scene with Stamets and Adira, again, sort of that idea of like nudging things forward a little bit with the storyline and with the burn, sort of what I was talking about in my non-spoiler section. It was a very nice scene between Adira and Stamets, but it didn't really feel like it was adding anything all that new from last episode. It was just sort of more of Stamets caring for Adira and Adira sort of being without Gray. It felt more like a reminder of that stuff. It was very well acted, but it didn't really feel like it pushed anything or said anything new that we hadn't already known. But very well done for what it was, but it felt more like just a sort of running in place scene just to remind us that this storyline is still going on while we're dealing with other stuff, so we didn't like forget about it for next episode, because we might be having 2 or 3 episodes before we get back to that storyline. And then we get another one of those scenes sort of very similarly between Saru and Book. That felt like it progressed things a little bit more than what we saw, with Book actually asking to be in Starfleet and Saru saying like, hey, you need to learn a little bit more about Starfleet. You'll get the chance to prove yourself. All very well done stuff. Again, it just felt like it was just sort of poking the storyline with Book forward after last episode, but not really like pushing it forward all that much because they wanted to focus on other things, but just sort of gently remind us that that storyline was going on. But this one felt at least a little bit more consequential than the Adira and Stamets one. This one at least felt like it was nudging forward the Book storyline, if not in taking a full step forward. And then we get the last major scene of consequence in our version of Discovery this episode, which is we get the signal finally decoded about the burn. Thankfully, the burn signal was not the USS Discovery that was in that nebula. I know a lot of people were theorizing that the signal was Discovery, and that was going to tie into Calypso, and that was sort of reference to the burn stuff that we learned last episode. I'm glad that it's not the Discovery, because I'm really hoping that we don't eventually learn that the Discovery is the reason for the burn. That would be getting way too much into small universe syndrome. I sort of forgave the fact that Michael Burnham was the most important character in season 1 of Discovery, because it was the first season. It would make sense that we would be following the most important character, because that's where they chose to focus the story. Also, it was based out of a character decision that Burnham made. It wasn't like she was like the Jesus of the universe. She was just sort of a character that happened to be there at this point and make this decision, which set off these events. Season 2 got me a little bit more frustrated with that, because it's just sort of like there was no setup. It's just like Michael Burnham's mom, and then eventually Michael Burnham was the Red Angel. That felt a little bit more frustrating, but I will allow one Jesus Savior moment per show. But if in Season 3, the reason for the burn turns out to be the Discovery, and the Discovery is the most important ship in the galaxy, even outside of the Spore Drive stuff, that would get a little bit frustrating and small universe syndrome. So I'm willing to forgive the first 2 seasons. I don't think they're that bad, even though I have a little bit more problems with Season 2's sort of development on that front. But if they do it again, I would be very, very frustrated. And so I'm glad that the signal turned out to be this Kelpian signal of a Federation ship. And I like that Saru's reaction to seeing Kelpians. Like, we knew that he knew that Kelpians had joined the Federation, but this is the first time he's really seen proof of that. And so it was just sort of nice to see him react to that. He would sort of have an emotional reaction to that, and sort of led that scene a little bit more depth than it otherwise would have. It would have just felt like an exposition scene. It's like, all right, here's the next piece of the burn information. But I'm glad that it was given a little bit more weight through this Kelpian moment. A little bit of like tacked on drama, but at least it made the scene feel a little bit more impactful than it otherwise would have if it had just been straight exposition. But enough about all of that, because who cares about any of that stuff, even though I spent a good chunk of my review on it, because holy crap, now let's actually focus on what this episode really was about, and back with Burnham and Georgiou. So we go down to this snow planet, which, by the way, I like that it was a snow planet. We don't get a lot of snow planets in Star Trek. I think the only one that immediately comes to mind is the Climb from Deep Space Nine, which really wasn't that much of a snow planet. It was just kind of a cold planet. If you go back and rewatch the episode, it's not really all that snowy if you watch it. And then also the snow planet from Star Trek 2009. Those are the only ones that immediately come to mind for snow planets. So I always like seeing snow planets. I love like sort of snowy scenery. I'm a snow kind of person. I like the cold snow environments. So that was nice to see. I loved the conversation between Burnham and Georgiou on this planet, sort of like their resentment at each other of not being the sort of person that they wanted them to be. I thought that was all very, very well done. And I sort of like the character beats between them. But then we come across Carl and the Mystery Door, which sounds like a band. Carl and the Mystery Door sounds like a band name, but oh my gosh, I was super fascinated by this character. My first instinct is like, is this Q? Is this a Q? Especially since he starts talking about questions and things like that. So I am very, very intrigued about if this Carl guy is Q. But another possibility came to my mind too, is that maybe he's the Guardian of Forever personified. And the reason I think that is because friend of the show, Aaron Harvey, who runs his own podcast, The Infinite Trek, he sent me a Twitter message right when this episode aired. And he basically showed me some capture images he had of Carl's paper, alongside some images from the City on the Edge of Forever. And if I can pull that up, I might have this up here, but you can see that the name of the paper is the same paper from City on the Edge of Forever, and we see the 21st century, or the 21st Street mission, which is also the mission from City on the Edge of Forever, the episode with the Guardian of the Galaxy, or Guardian of the Galaxy, Guardian of Forever. Guardian of the Galaxy would be a completely different thing, and also really cool, but in a very different way. But I'm sort of thinking, like, maybe there's some ties with the Guardians of Forever. I mean, why would he have that paper if with all those Guardians of Forever references and the City on the Edge of Forever references, if that may not come into play? It could just be some frivolous little Easter eggs that some prop designer thought they were being clever and cool and put in there, which would also be kind of fun. I like that idea. But the very fact that they all have to do with a time travel episode, and this is a time travel-y kind of character, and we're dealing with time travel-y kind of weird dimension hopping stuff here, has me thinking that maybe there are some ties with the Guardian of Forever and this character. I wouldn't be all that surprised if that turned out to be the case. So is it Q? Is it a Guardian Forever? I honestly, I'm not really all that into speculation. I don't do a lot of speculation on this channel, but with this character, I am just super intrigued. So I'm just going to do a call. Let me know your theories down in the comments below, because I am just, I am speculating wildly here, and I'm super fascinated. And I hope, while we don't get much more with him this episode, I hope we get a little bit more with him next episode. I would be shocked and upset and surprised if we didn't get a little bit more about him, but I am deeply, deeply curious to see who this Carl character is. And I loved how his dialogue get into play with Burnham and Michael. I thought it was, Burnham and Georgiou. I thought it was equally mysterious, equally fun. He clearly is just like able to poke their buttons and knows everything going on with them. Again, very Q-esque in his traits and his sort of awareness, and able to poke fun at these characters and sort of undress them, as it were. So I very much enjoyed his interplay. I thought it was a lot of fun. But then Georgiou steps through the door into the mirror universe. And not only that, the mirror universe of her past, sort of before that we ever even met her in season 1 of Star Trek Discovery. Everyone, this was very, very fun, and this becomes the meat of the episode going forward. So much to talk about here. I'm going to go through each specific scene, but something that I kind of really want to mention overall is this storyline kind of develops the way that you would expect it to, with sort of showing how Georgiou has changed from her time as the Emperor in sort of subtle ways and some not so subtle ways, or how she's not changed all that much at all. And I just want to kind of put up front here is I really liked that this sort of addressed a criticism that I had of season 1 of Star Trek Discovery. I did a video way back during season 1 of Discovery about LORCA, and my big problem with LORCA was he was not influenced at all by his time in the Prime Timeline. He had spent all his time in the Prime Timeline, he had led the USS Discovery, but when he goes back to the Mirror Universe, becomes this big mustache twirler, make the Empire great again. And he wasn't at all really affected ideologically from his time with the Federation. He even calls Saru a friend, and yet his empire would inherently kill Kelpians, and that's never really addressed within the episode. And so I was always kind of disappointed in the loss of Lorca's characterization there, and I'm liking that they're sort of retroactively doing that with Georgiou here, and showing how she has changed just inherently by being in the Prime Universe and with the Federation. I thought that was a lot of fun, and just addressed a heavy criticism that I had of that. So I'm going to dive into the actual specific scenes, but I really liked how this goes. It's not at all surprising, but it is effectively done for what it is, and clearly all the actors are having a ton of fun with all of it. And the first actress who gets to have a lot of fun is, of course, Mary Wiseman Tilly as Captain Killy. She's clearly loving being over the top, being the Killy captain. And it's also, I will say, it's a nice reminder that way back in season 1, they seeded this idea that Tilly has what it means to be a captain, that she was able to pretend to be Captain Killy and was a captain in the Mirror Universe, and we knew that all the way back in season 1. So it's nice that that kind of gets reminded to us here, at the same time that Tilly is being promoted to First Officer of Discovery in the Prime Universe. It's just a nice little reminder, like, yes, she does have it in her to be a captain, albeit in a weird, creepy, scary, terrifying way, but she does have it in her to be captain. So I like that sort of like subtle seeding and reminder of this idea that was put all the way back in season 1 of Discovery, right at the time where we probably needed it as a nice little reminder for what the Prime Universe Tilly could be. We get some nice little fun scenes between her and Georgiou, and the nice little tete that you get in the Mirror Universe, the sort of like game playing. I like the sort of theater of this entire sequence of events throughout the Mirror Universe, until it becomes quite literal theater, but you just get this idea throughout all of these scenes that a lot of this is just putting on a show for other people. You're trying to like put on a show. You're always on a stage in the mirror universe, very much so. You're trying to show power and authority and strength at every single moment. And I like how they literalize that with the theater moment later on, but it's always a constant background of everyone's playing each other. Everyone's playing a role, playing a character in order to look strong. Also, the other thing with the scene where between Giorgio and Tilly is Owo, throughout this whole episode, Owo is terrifying. Like, everyone's kind of scary, but Owo and her, like, I will murder you eyes the entire time, just sort of deadly staring at everyone around the Emperor. Owo is phenomenal. I was very scare-roused throughout the entire sequence with her. Sorry, I don't mean to sexualize her, but you all know I have a thing for women that terrify me. If a woman terrifies me a little bit, I'm probably also a little bit attracted to them. Sorry, apologies. You can knock me in the comments for sexualizing the character. I do apologize, but look, give me this one. Give me this one, okay? Anyways. Oh God. Then we go to the party sequence. Nice little reminder of season 1 of Discovery with the party sequence way back in that episode where I liked seeing them let loose. The knife throwing party would make sense. The agonizer drinks. Of course they have agonizer booth drinks. That makes total sense. That masochistic sort of drink that they would have in the Mirror Universe. Of course they would. Liked that. Then we get Mirror Universe Burnham for the first time in live action. There was, I will say, there was a very wonderful comic book series set post season 1 of Star Trek Discovery in the Mirror Universe, which dealt with Mirror Universe Burnham and what happens to her post season 1 of Star Trek Discovery, which I highly recommend. It's a great 3-issue comic book series, but it's nice to finally see her in live action. And Sneeko Martin Green is just clearly also relishing this role and just having fun, kind of being a little bit off kilter, not all there. Burnham, she clearly feels like she has a couple screws loose, a little bit even more than most in the Mirror Universe. And so I like, again, the sort of game playing that she has with Giorgio, and that Giorgio always has to be on edge, which probably is reminding her of the Burnham that she used to know, and like how she could let her guard down a little bit with that Burnham and couldn't let her guard down with this one. That the Burnham that she was always holding Prime Universe Burnham to was not someone that loved her anyways. And so she had this idealized version of her Mirror Universe Burnham that really wasn't what she wanted anyway. So I like that sort of reminder of like, oh, her remembrances aren't really what actually existed in her life. So that was really a lot of fun throughout those scenes. We also get Saru here, and again, this reminder of like, she's changed. She's willing to save Saru's life. And yes, she's doing it for her own advances, and it can make it logically make sense in terms of the theater of everything. But I like that sort of reminder that she's changed a little bit. She does have respect for Saru, and it works very well off of the earlier scenes this episode with her mild respect showing for Saru and their goodbye. So great little scene there. I like the fact that when she goes into her Emperor's quarters, which great quarters, by the way, she has this wonderful scene with Saru, who she's able to like manipulate, and she makes good points about, you get to see worlds that I can't, and he may hear things, and also him being surprised at her knowing Vahari, again, showing how much she's changed, and sort of that being pulled back against her. Just the very fact that she knows Vahari would show to her opponents, Lorca and Burnham, that she has completely changed. Also, I'm really hoping they name drop Lorca a lot here, so I am very curious that means we will be seeing either Mirror Universe Lorca again next episode, or potentially even Prime Lorca, because there is a book called Desperate Hours, Drastic Measures of Desperate Hours, I forget which one, but one of the books that focused on Prime Universe Lorca, but one of the Star Trek Discovery books that focused on Prime Universe Lorca, which is my favorite Star Trek Discovery book. I highly recommend go reading it if you haven't read it yet. There is a post-credits, sort of post-after-the-book epilogue scene that shows that Prime Lorca is still alive. We don't know where, so maybe this next episode will show us Prime Lorca and we'll get Jason Isaacs back in. That would be a phenomenal little cameo here, and considering we got a lot of little cameos throughout this episode, like with Rekha Sharma coming back and reprising her role in the background here, but you also get Ariam in the background as well. The actress who plays Ariam was in the sort of background of the theater scene. Really, really great moment there. I also love the moment where Owo and I think it's Bryce, I believe, I forget his name, are fighting in the hallways, and you sort of like get that sort of like subtle sort of discussion between Burnham and Giorgio, where they're clearly talking about each other, even though they're more explicitly talking about this fight between Owo and Bryce. But I do like that they are really talking about each other. So very well written scene there for the two of them. The sort of like under the subtext of that scene was very well done. Then we get the theater scene. Clearly, Anthony Rapp is just enjoying himself himself doing the poetry for that whole bit, and doing this like cats. It was clearly a whole production and very, very well done. I'm surprised that the production designers of Star Trek Discovery really went that extra mile to do this theater scene and have the dancers do this whole bit with Georgiou's history, these sort of exposition theater, as it were. Makes perfect sense that they would have a theater like that and do that sort of thing for their emperor. That would be this extravagant show, again, highlighting the theater-esque theme of the Mirror Universe. And also just was kind of beautiful to watch and very well choreographed. So kudos to the production designers of Star Trek Discovery for going the extra mile for that scene, and the choreographers and people like that, because it was very beautiful and very, very evocative. And clearly they had a lot of fun doing it, especially Anthony Rapp. But then we get the most interesting thing. Number one, Georgiou's headpiece sort of lining up with that sun bit and the Charon that we saw from season 1 of Discovery. I liked that. It was a great little moment. Some VFX designer was very pleased with themselves in that moment where they had the sun shining through her little halo headdress. That was great. It did seem a bit extra that she would go through that whole bit just for that, but again, highlighting the theater of the Mirror Universe, that everyone sort of has to be in a role. But then we get a very intriguing moment where Georgiou kills Anthony Rapp's character, kills Mirror Universe Stamets, which is interesting, because that means that this is either not happening, this is all just a dream or some sort of thing, which is very probably the most likely option, given that she like stepped through that door thing and it's not actually time travel. But then again, it could be, given the Guardian of Forever sort of thing. Or that means the timeline has changed, because as we remember in Star Trek Discovery Season 1, Mirror Universe Stamets had survived and did not die at that point in the Mirror Universe, at least as far as I was aware. He might have just gotten trapped in the mycelial network, so maybe it's not a timeline changing. I don't really remember the specifics, but I feel like this is a timeline change. And if it is, super, super intriguing for where that may be going and what that means going forward, because it could be a Guardians of Forever timeline thing where the timeline has completely changed now because of her actions, and Georgiou's going to regret it next up. She's going to change the timeline, things going to be different, but then she gets back to her own, like, goes into the future. She's like, I don't really want this. I liked what I was in the Prime Universe, and she wants to change it back. That's my sort of speculation of where this character is going to go for her, that she's going to, like, settle in, like, I don't want to be the Emperor anymore. I want to be Georgiou in the Prime Universe, and maybe that's what sets her back on coming back. That's my guess for her character arc. It would be fairly standard, but I think it's all effectively done for what it is. But then Georgiou confronts Michael Burnham in the hallway. Really fun scene between there. Again, Sonequa Martin Green playing it up. She went full Joker there for a moment. She's like, yeah, do it, hit me. And she like gets full on crazy eyes. So very much read like Sonequa Martin Green was channeling the Joker there for a moment. But very, very fun. And the gruesome when Georgiou almost kills her, but just barely stops herself. I like that, because it is just like she just barely stops herself, and you get that little eking of blood on her neck. Very much like, ugh, for me. But I like that it was just a very slight hesitation. It makes sense for her character that she would get that close to doing it, but just pulling away. So I like that little difference for her. And I like that, again, she's changing her destiny, that she's willing to change the timeline. She's saying, I could do something different this time. Again, sort of setting off an idea what I think of next episode. And that's where we leave off at Terra Firma Part 1. As should be clear, as of the fact that I've talked so much about this, I really, really loved this. There's some really intriguing character stuff. Like I said, some structural stuff a little bit wonky, just by the very nature of what this episode had to be. So I don't necessarily count it as a huge negative. It was just a little bit wonky and just sort of like the weird like reminder nudging things forward. But once we got into the meat of this, a lot of interesting questions, especially with Carl, my boy Carl, and everything going on with Georgiou. Some nice little cameos, some big surprises in there and returns, and some intriguing questions for next episode, not only about Carl, but about, will we see Prime LORCA? Can she change the timeline? Nice little building out of her past, as well as Georgiou, and getting to see Mirror Universe characters that we never got to see before in the first time we went to the Mirror Universe, which is a bit of a disappointment. Some really beautiful dialogue and scenes and subtextual themes going on here, with the idea of always being, having to put on a show, not being able to show your true self to anybody. I also like the idea that Burnham brings up, is like, I was the king or the queen of that trash heap that you plucked me out of, but I never get to be myself in this Mirror Universe. I just am a reflection of you. Again, that idea of theater, and not having a true identity running throughout this episode, and coming up in a myriad of different ways. I thought was all really beautiful. Yeah, I loved this episode. I'd have to sit with it a little bit and also see part 2. So once I see part 2, I'll be able to have a clearer idea of whether this is my favorite episode of the season so far. But right now, it's definitely up there. excellent episode. I have rambled enough. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Who do you think Carl is? What did you like or dislike about this episode? Don't forget to subscribe as well. Don't forget I have a Patreon as well that you can help me out on. But beyond all of that, I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper. Thank you to all of my patrons this month, but especially Amanda Ronye Idanya, Catherine Lambeth, Ashley Ellen Bokikio, Miranda Janelle, Eli Bergmoss, Ashlyn Solstice, Michael D., Greg Gillum, Stephen Kleinard, Ulysses the Pagan, Randy Thompson, Munir Amlani, Chamomile T., Stephen Schuhart, Wellington Marcus, Boyd and Mary Beth Earl, Wayne Twitchell, Ish the Mad, Buttoneer, Roar, Christina Dalliance, Dominic Noble, John Steele, Michael Beam. She sells seashells by the seashore of Bajor. William Stewart, Gavin Robinson, The Sir Spence, BBD, Hannah F., Nathan Olson, Jason Knott, Andrew Jorgensen, Chris Brown, Jasmine, Maeve, Bree Beecher, Subraxis, Skylar Gray, Nathan Steele, Jane Packard and Chloe Dollar, Wen Dizzle Bizzle, Gretchen Badger, Geek Filter, Bush, Celestial Dawn, Din, Sarah Bastam, Polly Mina, Jacob Tovar, Piston Twisted Garage, Lily, Jean Mithun, Andrew Lamori, Lysa, Zone 1 Librarian, Michael Hardy, Corey Honkanen, and KT Dunn. Thank you so much to all of you. You're quite literally making my dreams come true, so I cannot tell you how thankful I am.